Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the regular meeting of council on March 10th to order. And I would like to let you know that both Mayor Kobayashi and the acting Mayor Day both have sent their regrets and are absent from the meeting tonight. So a resolution is required to appoint a chair for this meeting. So if I could get a mover and a seconder from a member of council to appoint someone as chair. Thank you.
I was hoping you'd nominate somebody else.
And seconded by Councillor Olson. Any opposed? Thank you. The resolution is passed.
Thank you.
Carry on.
I was thinking about opposing that. Thank you all. Firstly, we acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, and we're honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Wepsum nations. So approval of the agenda. There's an addition to the agenda. I'm informed item 6.4, which is to do with financing for the Public Works building, if we can add that. Get a mover. Seconder. Thank you. Councillor Grove. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you so much. We'll add that item. So that's for the changes. Approval of the agendas as amended. Mover and a seconder. Thank you and thank you. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Those agendas are adopted. Mayor's message. Well, I'm quite sure he sends his regrets for being double booked this evening. And I'm the lucky winner. So we'll keep things moving in his in a similar fashion to as he does, hopefully. All right. Adoption of minutes, February 24th, regular council meeting. Mover, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Olson. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you. Public participation. Members of the public will be provided an opportunity to present concerns or ask council questions. Comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. Bylaw number 1700-10, Colwood Official Community Plan, 1700, 2018, Amendment number 10. Bylaw number 1700-13, Colwood Official Community Plan, 1700, 2018, Amendment number 13. Bylaw number 2036, Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, Amendment number 215. After all that, if any member of the public is here and wants to step forward and address council, now is your opportunity. You can chew on that for a second. Marcy, do we have anybody online?
We have nobody online.
Thank you. Final call. Thank you so much. New business. I'd like to welcome Lenora Lee, partner with KPMG, who are conducting the audit on behalf of the city. Welcome. Go ahead and press the button. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me here tonight. I just wanted to take a few moments to take you through the audit planning report included in tonight's package. The purpose of this audit planning report is to provide you with some information as to our areas of focus with the audit, our preliminary planned materiality, and our timeline for executing our audit procedures. Overall, for fiscal 2024, the audit plan is relatively consistent with what you would have seen in prior years. This is our second year auditing the city, and so you'll be familiar with kind of our transaction streams that we focus on, as well as our audit process. In the current year, there is one new accounting standard that will have some impact on the city, a lot less than previous year's new asset retirement obligation standard, but nonetheless an area that management is working through. And on our front, we do have team continuity, both myself, our manager, Iamide, here with me tonight, as well as our staff for this year's audit. The first couple pages here of the report speak to materiality, and you'll recall from previous years, materiality is a measure of precision that we set in determining our audit approach. It's set by the audit standards, and so typically we are required to select a benchmark, either revenue or expenses, to set a planned level of materiality. For nonprofit organizations like the city, the materiality is typically based off of revenue or expenses. For the city, we've based materiality off of revenues, which were approximately 57 million last year. The audit standards allow us to select between a benchmark of 0.5% and 3%. This is dependent on a number of factors, such as the inherent risk of the organization or stability of the organization, any history of errors that we may have noted, the amount of volatility in the environment, as well as things such as access to other information. Based on the relative stability of the city and very predictable operations, very robust budgeting and financial reporting process, we've established materiality at the higher end of the range, which is fairly consistent with local governments and government organizations. So what that translates into is a materiality of approximately 1.52 million. It's not a round number because these statements are consolidated, so they combine both the city's operations as well as your proportionate share of West Shore. So this 1.52 million is both those entities together. When it comes to the city on its own, it's 1.5 million, which is a nice round number that makes a little bit more sense and gives you an indication that it's more of an art than a calculation. When we audit individual streams of transactions, we are auditing to a lower level of detail. So we're not necessarily ignoring everything that's less than 1.5 million. If in the course of our work we note individual audit differences that are greater than 76,000, we would discuss those with management, recommend they be adjusted in the financial statements prior to coming to you in May for review and approval. We would also track and note any adjusted or unadjusted audit differences greater than 76,000 in our audit findings report, which will also come to you in May. This slide here just gives you a visual picture of the city's consolidated financial statements, and it indicates that the city's operations are the majority, 99 and 97% of the respective assets and revenues of the financial statements. The other component represents West Shore, which is only 1 and 3% of the overall financial statements. As a result, the majority of our audit work is focused on the city, and as it relates to West Shore, our audit work is primarily agreeing those numbers to the audited financial statements of West Shore as a standalone entity. This just provides a few updates from last year's plan. As mentioned, no significant modifications year over year. There is one new accounting standard related to revenue. Management is going through the process of evaluating the impact of this change in standard. What it means is that areas such as licenses, permits, where there are performance obligations of the city, the revenue would match the timing of when the effort is incurred to earn that revenue. So let's say a building permit, for example, has various points in time in which the city is required to perform inspections before final sign-off. If revenue is currently recorded 100% at inception or initiation of the permit, this new standard will now require consideration of whether it should be streamed over time to match the inspection points. So overall, the stream of revenue may not be material to the financial statements, but nonetheless will require a little bit of work to understand if there are any timing differences on implementation. This next page just gives you a summary of our risk assessment of the various streams of transactions. You'll see most of them are base, with the exception of management override of controls. This is considered both a risk of fraud as well as a significant risk. That's required in the audit standards. So regardless of the type of entity, size, any sector, for-profit, not-for-profit, we're always required to assess management override as fraud risk and significant risk. What this basically means is that the day-to-day controls of the city may be operating effectively. There's good procurement controls, dual sign-off, etc. When it comes to preparing the financial statements, management is still in a position to potentially record adjusting journal entries outside of the day-to-day controls that could result in a particular outcome of the financial statements. So let's say one expense category is over budget, one expense category is under budget. Management does have the opportunity to record an adjustment at year end such that both categories would appear below budget. In response, our audit work focuses specifically on these areas where there could be management incentive, bias, or estimates required. And we focus specifically on the nature of those adjustments, whether they're consistent with business operations, and reviewing transactions recorded in and around year end. Again, we'll report on our findings with our audit findings report that comes to you in May. There are questions that we ask of council every year, specifically related to any instances of known or suspected fraud that you're aware of, and any particular areas of risk that we haven't yet touched on in our audit plan that you feel are appropriate and could have a material impact of error on the financial statements. The next few pages just go into a little bit more detail on our audit approach in each of the key transaction streams. I will go through in a lot of detail, but just touch on a couple of the highlights. In terms of developer contributions and donated assets, in this area, we're mostly looking at the value that is gifted to the city when a new development takes place. There may be infrastructure like roads, sewers, etc. And once the handover occurs, there is a value that the city records in its financial statements. So we do look at the transfer documents to ensure that the value in the statements are well supported by third-party documentation. For taxation, revenue, and deferred revenue, we're primarily looking at trend analysis here, as well as specific agreements for government transfers like gas tax to ensure that the timing and amount of revenue agrees to the provincial contribution agreements or federal contribution agreements. Salaries and benefits, we're mostly looking at trend analysis here, comparison to both prior year and budget, taking into account any adjustments included in the collective agreement or included within the budget assumptions. For capital assets, we review a sample of additions. So money is paid to acquire capital assets or the value donated, as I just mentioned. In terms of treasury and debt, our work here is mostly third-party confirmation, meaning that we're comparing to bank statements or MFA year-end statements. And then lastly, procurement and expenses, again here looking primarily at trend analysis, both comparison to prior year and comparison to budget. In terms of our key milestones and deliverables, we have already spent a bit of time on site prior to the end of the calendar year, doing things such as updating our knowledge of processes, our risk assessment. The balance of our audit work will be coming up pretty shortly here in a couple of weeks at the end of March. And then we'll come back to council in early May once the final draft financial statements are ready. We'll present our audit plan, our findings report prior to your review and acceptance of the financial statements. Those were the highlights of this planning report I wanted to touch on. There are a few other pieces of information in the appendices, such as a little bit more detail on the new accounting standards that's applicable in 2024. But I'll leave that content as read, but happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. We'll bring that back to council. Questions? Seeing none, I think you're good.
Great,
and
thank you.
We'll see you soon at West Shore Parks and Rec, I guess, right? Item 6.2, Mr. Bourhill.
Thank you, Acting Chair Dean. So we've got an item before us the council is probably familiar with. The staff report outlines a proposal for a second contribution agreement with Parks Canada, amounting to approximately $253,000. This is intended to provide support for collaboration on pre-feasibility work towards the new National Urban Park, proposed to be centered around the Fort Rod Hill and Fiskard Lighthouse National Historic Sites. I'm joined this evening by Alana Green of Parks Canada, our lead contact on the Greater Victoria National Urban Park project. Once I'm done with the introduction, Ms. Green will provide an overview and update on the National Urban Park Initiative, and we'll both be available for questions. Next slide. Yeah. So if accepted, this would be the second contribution agreement since the city signed a statement of collaboration with Parks Canada back in 2021. This new agreement would provide roughly $250,000 over the next 12 months, starting on April 1st of this year. Next slide, please. As proposed, the funding would go to three main areas, the largest being capacity support for Colwood staff, equivalent to the full-time cost of a 12-month parks planner position. Second is the project funding for the city to hire consultants to assist staff with an expanded biodiversity conservation strategy, which is now in progress, as well as continuation of the development of a Colwood public engagement strategy for the next planning stages of the National Urban Park project that would commence in 2026. And lastly, a scoping study to look at the potential geographic boundaries of a future National Urban Park. That scoping study would also look at potential partnership models as part of the National Urban Park mandate. So the drafting of a detailed project plan for the scoping study is pending council direction on the second contribution agreement. And if we were to proceed, a next step would be presentation of that detailed work plan to council for approval. Lastly, $23,000 is offered to cover related overhead costs. This is expected to roughly equal the new in-kind staff time required to support the body of work. Most significantly is that of my time to oversee the projects and the potential new staff resource that would require roughly, we estimate 160 hours of my time over the course of the 12-month period. It is estimated that management of the three projects would require no more than 50% or 1,350 hours of the time at the parks planner rate over the course of the agreement. Last slide, please. My introduction concludes with the staff recommendation before you to accept the contribution agreement. But before council considers this item, I ask that Ms. Green be given the floor to make her presentation.
Welcome. No, it's at the base of the, right here.
There it is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you today about the National Urban Park project. I've presented here a few times, and it's always been a great pleasure of mine. As a slight refresher, so the National Urban Parks program, next slide, please, is a relatively new program for Parks Canada. The speech from the throne in 2020 allowed us to expand into a National Urban Park program. And then in 2021, there was a budget commitment for the next 5 years to establish up to, I believe, five national urban parks. Yes, so I don't think we really have to go into a lot of the benefits of urban parks. I think especially the people of the city of Colwood really understand and connect with nature in a very meaningful way. But here are some of the highlights of what we at Parks Canada believe are some of the benefits of urban parks. So we, I stand corrected, designate up to 6 national urban parks, including one proposed for the national urban for the Greater Victoria area. So we hope that to identify national urban parks of national significance where it makes sense for the federal government to play a role. Next slide, please. And what makes this process very special for Parks Canada is our very collaborative approach that we are taking. So at the at this proposed national urban park, we are collaborating with several of First Nations in the area, and of course, municipalities like the city of Colwood. And the types of models that we have are varied. So I'll just ask that we move to the next slide. Sorry, the slide after that. The different governance models. So there could be a partnership model. It could be a federally administered place. These are the things that we're exploring right now with our partners at the National Urban Park in the Greater Victoria area. Next slide, please. And I believe we've mentioned this several times, but the core objectives of the National Urban Park are connecting people with nature, protecting nature. But in the Greater Victoria area, we're really highlighting reconciliation with Indigenous people. And it's one of the repeated shared values that we're hearing at the partnership table, including some really lovely comments that we've heard from City of Colwood staff about how important reconciliation is to the municipality here. Next slide, please. And so we have the Victoria region, Saskatoon region, Winnipeg, Windsor, Halifax, and Edmonton as some candidate sites. And we've also just started early discussions with Montreal. I also just want to highlight that we've really enjoyed working with the City of Colwood staff. Iain and Ryan have been really wonderful, as well as Vivina and the financial staff, and as well as past staff members like Nafisa. We really enjoyed our collaborative meetings and hearing about the priorities of the City of Colwood and finding ways to work together and finding that shared value. I believe the interim parks policy has been shared with you as part of your package, and I do encourage everyone to read it. I know sometimes when Parks Canada or a federal department comes into some of these spaces, it feels like, oh, this is the federal government coming in to assert a national presence in this. But what is special about the urban parks policy is the flexibility. And, I live in this community. A lot of people who I work with are part of the City of Colwood community. And what we appreciate about this policy is that it's really going to have a very local feel. So we're putting the priorities of local people at the forefront of this policy, this proposed project. And we're really excited about what could come of it. So we're really hoping that through the recommendation with Iain, that we can continue this partnership through a contribution agreement. I'm open for questions now.
Thank you so much. So I'll bring it back to the table here and we're open for questions. Either staff or. Okay, I have a couple and then we'll get the ball rolling. I think Mr. Bourhill, you said part of this funding is to secure another planner in an interim kind of basis, like project specific, or is that another member of staff?
Thank you, Councillor Jansen, for that question. So we've tried to keep some flexibility in the proposal with Parks Canada. Essentially, we've been offered up to $130,000 in funding for Colwood staff capacity support. That could take the form of a new position that for 12 months. We haven't got there in terms of how we would slice and dice that, but certainly it would be equal to an FTE for 12 months at that park planner role.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say that what has been really pleasurable working with Iain is Parks Canada isn't sort of saying like, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. We understand that the City of Colwood has their own needs and they have to identify how they support their own capacity for this project. So we appreciate that the flexible approach as well.
Gotcha, thank you. And I keep waiting to see this being announced. I know it's been mentioned in budgets and money's been allotted and all that, but there hasn't been a big splashy announcement as of yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We haven't had a lot of announcements yet related to this. And part of that is because we want to be respectful of our nation partners and you know, what their understanding that they have engagement processes that they have to participate in. But we're really excited that we're moving in a really good direction. We've had several partnership meetings, and I think we're moving into a really good direction, as well as part of this contribution agreement is moving into the next phase of engagement. So hopefully we have a lot more public engagement upcoming.
Yeah, because this is exciting. And I mean, it's just exciting for the community and the region in general. Anything else from council? Seeing nothing, thank you so much. Anyone at all? Nothing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And thank you, Mr. Bourhill. 6.3.
Excuse me.
Sorry, go
Councillor
ahead.
Jensen.
Yes.
We actually have a motions that's proposed.
Sorry,
on the
there is, you're
agenda.
right, too.
Thank you.
That was not just receipt. Thank you. So there is a staff motion. I'll be looking for somebody. Is that you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Groves, sorry.
Thank you. I would just like to move the recommendation.
Perfect. Move the recommendation. Seconder, thank you. Mr. Ward, and anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you so much. And thank you, Marcy, for the reminder. 6.3, our manager of finance, Kathy.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor Jensen. So the report before you today is to introduce the concept of the City of Colwood to act as a qualified donee for intermediaries that are interested in applying for funding, grant funding. In this case, it's from the Victoria Foundation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But they don't qualify because they do not have charity or qualified donee status. So it's a common relationship that exists between organizations, but it's the first time to my knowledge that we're acting in this capacity outside of West Shore Parks and Rec, which we have a partial ownership in. So for this year's grant funding from Victoria Foundation, we had two organizations approach us to act in this capacity. One is the Reimagine West Shore Community Society, who is looking for $30,000 in funding, and Arts and Culture Colwood Society is also interested in applying for a grant of $14,255. Both organizations are represented here today if council should have any questions. So the main body of the report is just to surface and socialize the mandates that these organizations are trying to provide for Colwood. And so it has to be an extension of Colwood's own activities is the definition that Canada Revenue Agency uses. So there is risks and responsibilities to the city. That's sort of the message behind the report, is that we don't just enter into it lightly. So if these are activities that council would like to pursue and these are in support of our body of work, then the staff recommendation is to approve these requests, and here happy to answer any questions.
And thank you, Kathy. Questions? Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Thank you, Kathy, through the chair. I appreciate that. I also appreciate, well, not appended here, that you were able to share the detailed analysis that you did on the risk assessment for both. For me, it was important to see not just the tool that we use, but your assessment. And I think I say that because while council makes a decision on it, at the end of the day, the biggest consideration for me was twofold. It was the potential risk anytime you're dealing with financial considerations, but the workload and financial impact potentially on our finance department. And so I guess that's my question I'll get to. I would say just off the cuff though, that certainly both applicants are well known to everybody on council. I think everybody in the community is generally very supportive. I'm very supportive, but just have to still ask the question. So I'm wondering how we may have quantified the financial consideration. Like we do mention there's obviously no direct financial implication, but there are indirect impacts, mainly staff time. I'm wondering if we can attach a number to that. And the reasoning for me to do that is to understand how significant is it on our finance team, but also when we come time to grant an aid and things like that, in fairness, I think we have to be equitable and look at, okay, do we deduct an amount? Is it insignificant? Is it, in kind considerable, thousands of dollars worth of labor? I just wanted to get a sort of a dollar estimate, if you will.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. So we have structured it in a way, we haven't structured anything, but we have talked about structuring in a way that the organizations are the ones doing the bulk of the work. So they're creating the application content, they're providing the reporting that we need to support our requirements. Of course, we'll have some oversight and requirements that we see that reporting. But we can build in an administration fee to cover costs of our staff time. And so we can put that into the agreement. I think it's between 5% and 20%. So we could up the funding request by that amount to cover some of the city's costs if we so desire. And otherwise, I'm really hoping to keep the costs down to a minimum, like less than 10 hours a year, because it's really the bulk of these requests are for salaries. So it should be easily verifiable, but we also want to see that the program is being achieved, like what are the outcomes? But again, the bulk of that reporting is on the organizations, and we are just monitoring that the project is executing as intended because we are on the hook to control and organize the work.
Great, no, thank you for that. And I think certainly for me anyway, I can only speak for myself that I'd be comfortable with city staff assessing and determining if there is a need for any cost recovery on it. And then I guess the upside of that is it keeps it separate then potentially from grant and aid applications or anything. And then the question of being equitable and fair doesn't come into the picture at that point. So thank you for that. I'll leave it to the next colleague here.
Councillor Olsen.
Thank you. You may have already answered my question, but to direct it to you, there's reference in here that the organizations would partner with the city to submit applications for grant funding. And so again, that comes back to staff time. So is that something that the organizations, just clarity on, the organizations are responsible for the grant applications or partnering with the city? Is there any support there, like time being spent on those applications?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Olsen. So the organizations are responsible to they have downloaded the application and they have filled in all of the sections, and then pending council's approval, then we will submit the applications tomorrow. The deadline is tomorrow. There is just a couple of sections that the city of Colwood is responsible to complete, and the organizations take a stab at that, and then I will edit those if there's anything that we need to change. So minimal time on our part.
Thank you.
In the midst of audit season. Thank you. Any other questions? I just made a note to myself while you were talking that where does this go from here? If we approve this, do you see a flood of similar groups coming forward, making similar applications?
That was a concern, but we have learned that we're limited in the number of qualified donees that we can sponsor at a time. Okay. So there is a limit of 2 today. Okay. And so it could turn into, I guess, it hasn't yet, but it could turn into a competition, I guess, of sorts, or we would have to have criteria then if it comes to that.
Okay. And do you feel like you have enough direction from council? Is there anything in the way of a motion or, other than what's before us here for this evening, but for the future as far as policy and procedures, are we in a good position?
Oh, I think so. And there's a lot of guidelines and recommendations on the Canada Revenue Agency website and sample partnership agreements. There's a lot of material that we can use to guide us forward. If we have questions, certainly we'll be back before you.
Thank you. And I see there is a recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Grove. The recommendation itself is that Council direct staff to proceed as qualified donee for the 2 requesting organizations, which was Reimagine West Shore and Arts and Culture Colwood Society, and that further staff establish necessary reporting from intermediaries to allow the city to maintain direction and control of the projects. Councillor Grove, a seconder. You can't second Councillor Grove. Councillor Ward. Thank you so much. And I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much. And thank you, Kathy. Bylaws. Sorry, 6.4. Yes, our amended agenda. Item 6.4, which has to do with consideration to rescind the resolution of July 8th council meeting pertaining to funding for the public works building. Thank you, Councillor Olson.
So you just need a motion here
Yeah, thank you.
to rescind the resolution?
Thank you, Councillor Olson, and thank you, Councillor Grove. Any questions? Discussion? Thank you so much. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you so much. 6. Now on to bylaws. 7.1, bylaw number 1700-13, official community plan, amendment 3698 Metchosin Road for adoption. Mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Olson, and a seconder. Anybody? Thank you, Councillor Grove. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you. 7.2, bylaw number 2036, land use bylaw amendment 3698 Metchosin Road for adoption. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Grove, Councillor Olson. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you. 7.3, bylaw number 2055, land use amendment 499 Roll Bay Drive for adoption. Mover and a seconder. Is that mover, Councillor Jordison, seconder, Councillor Ward. Discussion? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Thank you so much. 7.4, bylaw number 2057, land use bylaw amendment, car lot amendments for adoption. Mover. Go ahead. Let's start with discussion. Councillor Grove, how about that?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Jensen, Acting Chair.
Think something.
Councillor Jensen. I would just, in light of the nature of this bylaw as it appears on the agenda, I would like to propose that we defer this bylaw for a future council meeting in April, and that we council directs staff to draft a bylaw that will allow site-specific existing car lots. The need to allow the existing car lots to function in a normal course of duty and business without undue effect by some bylaw that council happens to pass. I think this is important. It comes to my attention that there's an issue with insurance that they may face if they are under the existing proposed bylaw. They're faced with what would be a non-conforming type of structure. So I would like to make this resolution that to replace the number 7.4.
So that's a motion to defer. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Olson. No discussion on a deferral other than a date. Do we need to select a date, or are we comfortable with sometime in April? Thank you. We're comfortable with sometime in April. And with that amended motion, I would call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? And unanimous. Thank you so much. Is that it? That is it. Sorry, you look confused. Are we all caught up? Thank you so much. And adjournment. Mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Olson, Councillor Ward. Anyone opposed to adjournment? I thought not. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope it was exciting.
Thanks, Steve.